Good morning and afternoon, everyone. It is 12:30 in Greece and 11:30 in Central Europe. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this fifth CEDEFOP European Year of Skills virtual get-together. My name is Jasper van Loo and I work at CEDEFOP as coordinator in the Department for Vet and Skills. CEDEFOP is the European agency that supports vocational education and training, or VET as we call it, and skills policy and its implementation. We work for the whole of Europe and with the European Commission, the EU member states, social partners, civil society, other EU agencies and institutions, and of course the vet sector. This year is the European Year of Skills. At CEDEFOP we organize virtual get-togethers throughout this important year. That means until May next year, because the European year will end then. At today's get-together, we look at how we can use evidence about labor market trends and skill needs, or as we also call it, skills intelligence, how we can use that in skills matching measures and practices on the ground. Today, we put several practices in the spotlight. We discuss what makes them successful, what are constraints, and what are potential development opportunities. Skills matching is about making the link between people, their skills and ambitions, and jobs and new opportunities in the labor market stronger. For example, via training or upskilling, or by broader skills initiatives in support of just digital and green transition. As with any event, we have a couple of housekeeping rules, and they should appear on the screen right now. First, if you have not done so, please name yourself. First and last name and country or organization. Second, webcams will automatically be disabled and you will be muted throughout the meeting. But that does not mean you cannot interact with us and ask questions. You can use the chat function to do so, and you can also interact via CEDEFOP social media channels. You can also use the chat to contact our support team should you experience any technical problem. At CEDEFOP, we take continuous improvement seriously. At the end of this event, we will ask you to take 2 minutes of your time to complete an evaluation form. You will get a link in the chat. Finally, this event is being recorded so that people that were interested to join today but could not make it can watch it via our YouTube channel afterwards. So let's dive into the evidence and let me welcome Konstantinos Pouliakas. Kostas is one of my colleagues in the Department for Vet and Skills. He leads the Skills and Work team and manages the Future of Work and Skill Mismatch projects here at CEDEFOP. Kostas, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Jasper, for the introduction, and a warm welcome to all of our participants. My name is Konstantinos Pouliakas. As Jasper mentioned, I work at the Department for Vet and Skills at CEDEFOP, and I have been coordinating the work of the agency on skill mismatch over the past decade or so, in particular amassing evidence on this important phenomenon with CEDEFOP's European Skills and Jobs Survey. And in particular, what we have also tried to do is to collect information not only on trying to measure the incidence of the phenomenon, but more importantly, and this is the focus of today's event, to try to understand what are countries actually doing on the ground, what type of policies have they been designing in order to try to tackle and mitigate the phenomenon of skill mismatch. So can I just confirm, Jasper, if you can see my presentation well before I proceed?
Yes, we're good.
So in essence, the focus of my presentation today is on not so much on talking about the phenomenon of skill mismatch and the various pieces of quantitative evidence that we have collected at CEDEFOP with a wide array of different skills intelligence tools that we have at our disposal. By contrast, what we're focusing today is on what we are calling the Matching Skills online tool, which is a new revamped database that CEDEFOP has made available very recently. And this is a database that I will be describing to you today, and I will be presenting some evidence from an analysis of this new database containing information on different types of skills anticipation and matching policies implemented in EU member states. Before I move on to talk about the database and review the evidence from the Matching Skills online tool, I think it's worthwhile to reflect on the context that has driven us to collect this information. We start from the basis that, as also revealed by CEDEFOP's long-standing now research on the phenomenon of skill mismatch, we start from the basis that skill mismatch is a multifaceted phenomenon. Very often in the policy debate, we tend to get consumed by the fact that there are different pieces of evidence highlighting that European labor markets are experiencing so-called labor and skill shortages. And of course, these in the current policy discourse as well are quite prominent. There's a lot of discussion about the fact that in the post-COVID-19 era, labor and skill shortages seem to be on the rise, as indicated by different type of pieces of information, like increasing labor market tightness, for instance. However, it's always worth bearing at the back of our minds that there are many different types of skill mismatches, such as, for instance, vertical skill mismatches, when people's qualifications are not matched to what their job needs, horizontal skill mismatches, when their field of study is not matched to what their job needs, skill gaps, when people find or believe that they do not have the right skills necessary to do their job to a competent level. And there's also other types of skill mismatches that are sometimes discussed, such as the fact that people may suffer from skills obsolescence, where some of their skills become outdated over time. They lose market value, for instance, because of new technological developments, and also skill underutilization, where adult workers may indicate that they feel that their skills are not being effectively utilized in their job. So you can understand that when we talk about skill mismatch policies, we need to take into account all of these different types of mismatches. And this was one of the main driving force behind our ambition to review and understand what type of skill matching policies EU member states have been putting in place recently. In other words, we have been trying to pay particular attention to not only focus on policies covering skill shortages, but also trying to understand if EU member states have been implementing policies targeting other types of mismatches as well. And we were driven to do so because we know from our skill surveys, in particular our European Skills and Jobs Survey, which is Europe's main survey focused on trying to measure the incidence of different types of skill mismatches in EU member states. We know that there is abundant evidence showing that a significant part of the EU workforce suffers from incidences of surplus skills, incidences where there's a large part of the workforce who feel that they're overeducated for their jobs and overskilled in the sense that they cannot effectively deploy their skills as part of their job. And typically, we also understand and measure that there are particular member states, Hungary, Greece, Ireland, Cyprus, Spain, who suffer from multiple types of mismatches, a combination of both vertical and horizontal mismatches. And there are very few EU member states where such types of mismatches tend to be low, such as in Slovenia and Germany, Netherlands, Finland. So we know that we need to understand the different type of mismatches, and we need to understand what type of mismatch policies have been put in place. So in 2010, together with the support of our main contractor, the Fondazione Giacomo Brondolini, and under the guidance of Professor Terence Hogarth, who will be speaking after me, we engaged in a pan-European effort to try to collect information, specifically addressing the question of what type of skill mismatch policies are being are in place or are being designed in EU countries. And the focus of the tool was basically on two different elements. On the one hand, to try to understand to what extent countries are implementing vocational education and training policies aimed at matching the skills of workers to what our labor market needs. And on the other hand, we also collected information on what we call skills anticipation policies. So what type of policies are countries implementing in order to understand better what are the skill needs in their country, and also what are the potentially the emerging or future skill needs in their country. So we have these two pillars of the tool. On the one hand, the skills anticipation initiatives, where we eventually found that there are around 65 such initiatives in the 27 EU member states, and we also identified another 37 key policy measures who had a specific target to provide vocational training to workers so as to match their skills to labor market needs. So you can go on Cedefop's website on the link that you can see at the end of the slide, and you can visit the new Matching Skills online tool. And with this tool, you will get access to over 102 skills anticipation and matching practices implemented recently in EU member states. And by recently, I mean that over 60 to 70% of the initiatives that are at the tool, exhibited at the tool, have been implemented in the past decade. There are some examples of policies also which are long-standing. They have been implemented even from a long time in the past, but we also ensured to keep those practices which have been experiencing some substantial revision in recent times. And by looking at the tool and visiting the tool, you can initially get information for all EU countries, and you can see the list of the 102 initiatives. And you can also use particular filters so as to, for instance, identify or retain only those initiatives which focus on skills assessment or anticipation, or those initiatives which constitute a core vocational education and training measure. You can then also explore the dataset in several different other aspects, such as, for instance, if you click on a particular initiative, such as the competent-based matching initiative from Belgium, which is one of the examples that we will discuss later on in the panel, you get a full description of the initiative. You can then also, for instance, try to understand more specifically what type of skill mismatches were targeted with this initiative. What is the focus in terms of skills matching? For instance, the particular initiative tried to upskill or reskill employed or unemployed adults, or it tried to address sectoral occupational shortages, and so on and so forth. You can find information on what skills are mostly delivered, or which are the skills that are the focus of the particular initiative. And also you can get complementary information on the specific type of research methods that are being used. For instance, if forecast methodology is employed, foresight, and so on and so forth, and what ultimate aim does the initiative have? For instance, that the information collected through the skills anticipation system in a country aims to inform the design of national qualification frameworks, or to design specific standards, educational and training standards, and so on and so forth. So what do we learn from an exploration of this database? In essence, what we have done is we have compiled the information, we have created a database of these 102 skill matching initiatives in tabular form, and we have then tried to analyze the database to see what are the key elements and the key pillars and foundations of these different type of skill mismatch initiatives. In terms of understanding what are the main policy areas that the initiatives have been addressing, it's not surprising that the main policy areas are employment, training, and education. And what is very interesting is that we tend to have a lot of complementarity. So in these initiatives, the national experts who basically collected the information about the skill matching initiatives identified that some of the primary targets of these initiatives were both to inform the design of employment policies, but also to inform the design of training and education policies. So here we can see that there's increasingly an overlap between employment and education and training policies in these specific type of initiatives, whereas there is much less focus on, for instance, social inclusion type of goals, informing migration policy, informing the green transition. Of course, the green transition at the time that the database was collected in 2010, 2011 was still not as high on the policy agenda as it is today. In terms of the specific types of skill mismatch that the policies are aiming to address, a very interesting finding is that essentially the main target of these initiatives is to try to get information or to design vet programs to mitigate skill shortages or skill gaps or skills obsolescence. So here you can immediately see that a main aim of these initiatives is to try to target the upskilling, reskilling, for instance, of workers, to try to improve the skills of young graduates who are entering the labor market. And there is much less attention in these 102 initiatives on the phenomena of skill underutilization or the phenomena of excess skills, which I described to you at the beginning, are also very important skill mismatch manifestations in labor markets. And yet you can see that from these from this snapshot or cross-section of the different type of skill matching initiatives implemented in EU countries, the phenomena of overqualification, skill underutilization tend to receive much less weight in policy decisions. Looking deeper into the initiatives, we also understand what type of skills are typically delivered through these skill matching policies. And it's very interesting to see that foundation skills are less in the focus, in the spotlight, whereas the design of these initiatives, the designers of these initiatives focus mostly on trying to ensure that young students, workers in jobs actually are upskilled, retrained in terms of their employability and soft skills and their career management skills, and also a little bit in terms of digital skills. I move on also to considering what does the tool tell us about the specific methods and the specific stakeholders who are involved in these skills matching policies. And there we can see that the method of skills forecasting is still quite dominant. In around 44% of the initiatives, it was identified that trying to forecast skills using a big quantitative econometric model tends to still be the main channel, the main method that is being employed in EU countries. But we can also see that there's a big share of initiatives who also try to explore skill surveys or try to use administrative data so that they can also identify what specific type of mismatches exist in their labor markets and also try to design their vet training programs to mitigate them and to target these type of skill gaps. Whereas graduate tracing surveys, vacancy surveys tend to be less utilized, less used. We can also see in around 14% that the use of real-time labor market big data, where countries are trying to use information from online job vacancies or information from the CVs of job applicants, is also something that is becoming relatively more used and utilized. And finally, in terms of the stakeholders, the main stakeholders who are involved in either being the main body responsible for the development and the monitoring process of these tools, we tend to see that national ministries, national agencies, and also to a smaller extent, public employment services in the EU countries are those main bodies. But these main bodies tend to be complemented very much by, to a greater extent, employer organizations who are increasingly taking up a substantial role in supporting these national ministries and agencies in the process of skills identification and matching. And also research centers, universities, training providers are assuming up a more important and prominent role in supporting these initiatives, but not, of course, being the main bodies responsible for these initiatives. So I conclude with trying to summarize, in essence, what have we learned from the Matching Skills online database and its analysis. We learned that, in a sense, EU countries, when designing recently their skills matching policies, still focus very much on trying to tackle and mitigate the phenomena of skill shortage, skill gaps, skills obsolescence. So instances where it is believed that workers, graduates do not have the right skills for the job, and therefore we need to do more in terms of investing in their vocational education training. And as I mentioned, this comes into contrast somewhat with the evidence, or at least we see that there is still a major gap in terms of policies also tackling the phenomena of skill underutilization. We see that there is increasingly an overlap and a complementarity between the design of employment, active labor market policies, and vocational education training policies. In terms of the main focus of these policies, it's typically at the, what we say in economics, the external labor market margin. In other words, policies tend to be designed to cater to unemployed people, job applicants, people who are trying to enter into the labor market, and less so, and of course also to trying to satisfy the needs of firms who are indicating that they have open vacancies. But there is much less focus on the upskilling, reskilling of existing workers. And it's important and a positive trait, I guess, that in these policies, emphasis is given on soft and digital skills. So in a sense, they do start on the basis that there is a good level of foundation skills on behalf of the workforce. And finally, in terms of how we involve stakeholders better into the process and how we can ensure that there's a better governance of the process, we do see that national ministries tend to have a dominant role to play, which is a good feature. But at the same time, increasingly, we can see that the arena of anticipating and matching skills is becoming one which is much more diversified, and one where many different players, such as social partners, universities, and other research institutions, are coming into the picture, and they do have a very important role to play. So with that, I conclude, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have over the chat. But I give the floor now to the second speaker of the day, Professor Terence Hogarth. Professor Hogarth, as I mentioned, is an esteemed professor from the University of Warwick, the person who supported us very much in the design, the collection of the information and the design of the Matching Skills online tool. And I conclude by also saying that Professor Hogarth has also supported Cedefop very much in our country support programs, where we have been working very much closely with a number of EU member states to improve their skills anticipation and matching systems. And of course, he has been doing such work also independently from Cedefop. So Terence, Professor Hogarth, the floor is yours.
Thank you for that. That kind introduction, Kostas, and thank you to Cedefop for inviting me to address you this morning. I'd like to talk about skills anticipation in an abstract sense in many respects, and the discussion which will follow with the other speakers, I think, will give you the nitty-gritty of what needs to be done to make skills anticipation effective in practice. So I'll talk in general abstract terms about what I think is effective skills anticipation. It's possibly our misfortune that we do live in interesting times, and this concept of permacrisis, which seems to make anticipation over the very short term extraordinarily difficult. And this is obviously something we just need to get to grips with. But I will try to summarize realistic approaches to identifying to anticipating future skill needs over the short to medium term, and trying not to fall into the traps of believing some of the hyperbole which seems to be dominating the discussion about skill mismatches, skill shortages, and so forth at the moment, and which seems to grab the headlines in a lot of the media. The problem which seemed to plague a lot of the 20th century was that of unemployment, but we now seem to be in a relatively good place insofar as labour demand appears to be buoyant. On the chart, I've presented some figures which compare the vacancy rate and the unemployment rate between 2010 and 2023, and the general situation across the European Union as a whole is one of unemployment being down and vacancies being up. Now, there are some countries which that isn't the case, and if one looks at the regional level, there are parts of the European Union where unemployment does remain at sort of historically high levels, particularly in parts of Spain and Greece, which tends to pose its own particular matching problems. But nonetheless, at this point in time, the labour market appears to be relatively buoyant, even if at times the labour market appears to be defying the laws of gravity. There are, for the job seeker, it's essentially a period of good times. There are lots of jobs out there. One of the problems that we have when we're talking about the state of the labour market is labour shortages and skill shortages tend to become conflated. There was a recent report from a recent EURES report produced by the European Labour Authority, which summarised the state of labour market imbalances across Europe. What were the jobs where there were shortages of people applying for those for vacancies, and where was there an excess supply of people applying for job vacancies? And the report, which drew very heavily upon a lot of Sedefop's evidence, revealed that where we see labour shortages, often they have very little to do with skills. It's much more to do with the terms and conditions of employment on offer, rather than there being a shortage or even a surplus of skills available. In other words, if you were to expand the supply of skills, you'd probably have relatively little impact upon solving these particular kinds of labour shortages. But there are a lot of mixed signals out there, and of course we're interested in what's going to happen in the future. So if things are very buoyant at the moment, what does the future promise? Well, if you prognosis of the impact of technology, especially AI, on labour demand, are often very startling. Certainly the ones which capture the headlines in the media. And the subtext often appears to be that in the future, digitization, AI, are going to get rid of large volumes of jobs. There's often not that much emphasis given onto the jobs actually which might be created as a consequence of these technologies. The message appears to be that large amounts of the work that we currently undertake will disappear. So the classic one being, just under half of all jobs in the US being at risk of automation over the next 20 years, 300 million full-time jobs being lost to automation, and so on and so forth. There are no end of these prognostications about what's likely to happen. And I think we need to be. This would suggest that the future may be one of unemployment rather than employment. But I think from a skills perspective, we need to take these prognostications with a pinch of salt. There might be a grain of truth in them. But if we look at the evidence on technological change from the past, it's often piecemeal. It's incremental. So there are times that because employers tend to be risk averse to making major investments. So there's time to make adaptations, time for the skill system to adapt. Even so, the evidence on skill mismatches, skill shortages in particular, whilst not demonstrating that half of all employment is going to disappear. Nonetheless, Costas' own estimates based on the first European Skills and Jobs Survey revealed that around 8 to 14% of jobs could be at risk, which is, if you turn that into numbers of workers, it's a very substantial number of workers indeed. And if we looked at evidence from the second European Skills and Jobs Survey, then that points to educational requirements of workers in general increasing over time, which suggests that skill needs within jobs are increasing. And that survey revealed that 12% of workers feel underqualified, although the bigger finding appears to be that actually we face a situation of skill surplus rather than skill shortage, given that 20% said they were overqualified. So there's a lot of evidence out there revealing that there are skill mismatches of one kind of another which need to be resolved in some way, not just shortages, but also resolving oversupply. Now, Costas made reference to the study that I was previously involved in, and this used Cedefop's skills governance framework, which essentially identified the key elements that need to be in place if you want to have an effective skills anticipation system in place. So it's to do with having the institutions, the organization, the processes all in place, which will allow you to provide information which is robust and it's believable and can be acted upon by a very wide range of actors. And I think over time, we've seen member states increasingly improve the infrastructure for providing anticipation. There is an awful lot of experimentation that takes place, which in some respects is a good thing, because from that experimentation, things can be learned, and a lot of that information is available in Cedefop's database. But nonetheless, these are the key elements which need to be in place to some degree for good skills anticipation to take place. And a key element to it is the degree of engaging a wide range of labour market actors in that system, so people buy into it. Social partnership, engagement of the social partners tends to be a very important part of good skills anticipation and establishing a good reputation for that skills system. A key element is, well, what data are required if you want to have a good idea of what's going on in the future. We need a future orientation. We need because there needs to be time in which to act to ensure that the skill system can actually adapt to the changes which are taking place. We can do that, certainly, I think, over the medium term. I'm a little more skeptical of whether or not we're able to do that over the very long term. We need timely, up-to-date information. We can't wait for a year for information to become available. It needs to be timely. It needs to be almost real time. We need indications of the scale of change which is likely to happen, granularity of data. Essentially, we want to look at data at the level of jobs, not occupations which group together jobs that are more similar than alike, but actual specific jobs. And also, we want to focus on skills. And this is one area where I think skills anticipation systems within countries have made some very substantial progress over recent years in producing information about what are the likely skill needs which the labour market will require over the short to medium term. And critically, we need local labour market information, and we need multiple perspectives. One, we need data from employers, we need from workers, we need from experts. No one source of information has a monopoly on the truth of actually what skills are required. And of course, that information all needs to be turned into something which is easily usable by a very wide range of actors. It's not data, it's actually labour market skills intelligence, which is important. And again, this is something where we've seen quite a lot of progress over in recent years, that the data has been put out there for a wide range of users to use. As I say, what works best tends to be a synthesis, multiple methods. It requires quantitative and qualitative insights. Quantitative data isn't always available at the detail we want. Sometimes it requires qualitative data. Survey data is vitally important, along with administrative data, in providing an indication of scale of future demands, as well as its content, and also providing information which tracks graduates through the labour market, so we can see the various returns that are obtained. Skill projections, forecasts are very important. But there are two more recent developments, I think, which perhaps are worth considering in further detail. First of all, skills foresight. As I said at the beginning, we live in an uncertain period, and skills foresight allows you to construct multiple futures. It provides an insurance policy. If the economy goes one way rather than another, what are the likely outcomes? And this can be a particularly useful way of anticipating skills, which is becoming increasingly common, I think, although it does tend to require scenarios which I think are meaningful rather than the more esoteric ones which are sometimes produced. In big data analysis, of course, skills have been a classic form of that. But it's not just limited to providing information about online vacancies. There is the capacity to use those data techniques to identify technologies, for example, emerging technologies from patent data, and what are the likely skill needs to be associated with those technologies. So we have a vast array of data which has been actively collected in many member states. The challenge is to turn that into something which assists with the matching process. We've got the data. It's just a case of being able to use that data to bring about actions which will reduce skill shortages, but I think more critically, be able to reduce the skill surpluses, which arguably, from a volume perspective, are more of an issue. Although shortages and surpluses are both important. So just to conclude quickly, labour shortages are likely to resolve themselves over the short to medium term. It's skill shortages and skill surpluses which we observe to be persistent. They tend to be sticky. I've mentioned shortages here, but I should also mention surpluses. They're sticky, they're persistent. They appear to be difficult to remove to the degree we might like. There's lots of good practice out there which is contained in the database, and it's about learning from what works well in different national and local contexts, so that all of this data can be used to much greater effect than arguably it has been in the past. Tremendous investments have been made in skills anticipation systems. I think we've got to the point now where it's about how we effectively use the variety of rich data which have been generated more effectively than possibly we have in the past, and maybe that's something which can be pursued in the discussions which follow. But anyway, I shall stop there, and thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much, Kostas, and also Terence, for the interesting presentations. I think we've had a good overview of the mega trends that are kind of shaping the skills intelligence landscape in Europe. As Kostas said, in this matching skills tool, we have 102 practices actually in this online web tool, which is new, fresh. And of course, we cannot talk about all of them, but we decided to talk about 3 of them. And those 3 are in a way special because 2 of them are actually, really built around skills intelligence methods that are really what we see as next generation skills intelligence. And that is foresight, and it's also using big data. And the other initiative is an example of a very good governance arrangement. It's where people get together and talk and jointly, let's say, set out lines for action in now and in the future. So that brings us to the final part of this virtual get-together, which is the panel discussion. And I'm happy that we have with us 4 panelists who actually present these 3 initiatives that are already mentioned, that are part of the Cedefop Matching Skills Web Tool. So if the speakers could be spotlighted, I would like to welcome, first of all, Noreen Fitzpatrick. Noreen is Manager, Enterprise Employees and Skills at SOLAS, and she will speak about the Skills to Advance initiative in Ireland. Then we have with us Despina Valesi. Despina is Scientific Associate of the Small Enterprises Institute of the Hellenic Confederation of Professionals, Craftsmen and Merchants. And she will explain how skills foresight is used for labor market diagnosis in Greece. Then, last but certainly not least, we have Leen Verachtert and Wille de Keersmaker from the Flemish Public Employment Service in Belgium, VDAB. And they will give us the ins and outs of the competence-based matching approach that they have been developing over the last few years. So first of all, welcome to the 4 of you. Thanks again very much for taking part. We really appreciate it. And just as a message to the audience that's listening and viewing, questions are welcome in the chat. We are responding to questions as they go, but we have room for more. We'll also have some time for Q&A later. So in the first round of the panel, I would like to give you all the opportunity to give a quick description of your initiative. And I'd like to start with Noreen. So could you please explain in brief how Skills to Advance in Ireland works?
Great. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And thank you, Jasper and Constance, for the opportunity to speak here today. I'm going to give you a brief overview of Skills to Advance. And just if you're looking for more information, please contact me directly and I can share some information with you. So Skills to Advance is a national initiative. It was developed in 2018 by SOLAS, the Department of Education and Skills at the time, and the Education and Training boards. And it provided upskilling and reskilling opportunities to employees in jobs undergoing change and to those currently employed in vulnerable sectors. So the purpose was to equip employees with the skills they needed to progress not only in their current role, but to facilitate the adaptation to the changing job market. So working with employers, especially SMEs, skills needs were identified in the workforce and subsidised education and training to employees is provided. So the policy potentially is open to all, but we had a particular focus on target groups such as those currently working in low-skilled jobs, those aged 50 or over, or working in a job that was experiencing significant change. But just to highlight, Skills to Advance offer is available at a level 5 and level 6 on the Irish National Framework of Qualification. So I think just to take a step back and to get an understanding of why Skills to Advance was so important, in the third quarter of 2019, there were almost 1 million people at work, which represented about 42% of the then labour market. And they only had a level 5 qualification, which was the equivalent to a Leaving Cert qualification. So this cohort of employees were potentially deemed most at risk in terms of disruption due to advances in technology, automation, or any other changes which happened both internal and external to their workplace. And we can see, strong evidence of that in terms of the external factors, such as Brexit and COVID. They highlighted the impact of these disruptions. But Skills to Advance is rolled out at 16 education and training boards across Ireland, and as such is available locally to employees. It's highly subsidised, it's delivered flexibly, And within the last 2 years, SOLAS, the Education and Training Boards, working collaboratively with enterprise partners and employer bodies, have engaged in the co-design and development of new micro-qualifications. And I think this is important in terms of what Constance was saying and Terence. You know, not only are they aligned to the National Framework of Qualification, but they are 50 hours of bite-sized chunks of learning in priority skill areas such as green, sustainability, digital, robotics, aquafarming, business innovation, and market development. So, you know, these are typically 25 hours with tutor support, and the balance is made up of self-directed learning. And these innovations are critical in the Irish labour market, especially in a time where there's almost full employment, where employers are citing that release issues for employees to upskill are challenging for their business. And hence we need to rethink what and how we deliver to ensure that we can support this continuous commitment to upskilling and reskilling to develop that agile workforce and competitive business. And so also just to say that Skills to Advance has been very successful with an initial target of 5,000 in 2019. With a renewed target of 18,500 per year now. So since 2019, we have upskilled over 54,000 employees in vulnerable employment. And I think that's amazing, even when we kind of delve down a little bit deeper into the profile of those employees, where with 51% of those employees had an educational attainment of a level 5 or below, 13% had an educational attainment of a level 6, and 35% had an educational attainment of a level 7 or above. And this is quite important in that whole reskilling space, whereby, you know, people who had received qualifications many years ago, the relevancy of their skills to date has to be questioned, and that need for continuous upskilling. So I suppose just some of the key takeaways, because I know this is a brief introduction, it's that, you know, in order to be able to support the continuous development of the right skills to be made available in the right format, collaboration with industry and the relevant enterprise agencies is really paramount to what Skills to Advance does. Not only do we have our standard offering to the Education and Training Boards, but the development of these new micro qualifications. We've 23 validated with the National Qualifications Authority of Ireland now, but it's important to understand the changes in the labour market and to ensure that we are equipped to be able to co-design and co-develop, where appropriate, the new relevant skills solution in a timely fashion to support this continuous upskilling and provide access to pathways should further depths of learning be required by industry in any of these key areas.
Thanks, Noreen. That was a very, a great overview of your initiative. If you would allow me one quick follow-up question, you talked about identifying jobs which are at risk and also workers which are at risk because they're vulnerable. Now, what kind of evidence do you leverage to to get a good image of in which labor market segment the problem is most pronounced?
Well, at the beginning in 2018, there would have been very detailed research carried out, but by our unit in terms of getting a really good handle of identifying those key sectors. But also in-house within SOLAS, the Further Education and Training Authority in Ireland, we have a research unit, and we're very much informed and guided by, not only the vacancies or the gaps or the trends, and we also sit on a lot of the national kind of expert groups on future skill needs to kind of look at what are the predictions, the forecasting, the future areas, so that we can future-proof the workforce and be able to identify and implement those kind of skills. And I think those micro qualifications are a very good example of that. Employers are telling us they don't have time to release people for long periods of time. We need to break it up and make it more accessible. And the entire Skills to Advance offering is accredited. So in terms of the employee having that option of mobility, it's really, really important and key for us. And, we are targeting the SMEs. So 86% of our participation is from the SME areas. So I think research, evidence-based, then the co-design, co-development, the collaboration with the key bodies, you need to get the whole mix and model correct to have the right offer with the relevant skills to be able to future-proof our workforce.
Thanks, great. And I think, you know, what you're saying about your micro qualifications, which in other places we call sometimes micro credentials, you know, is also a really good example of how you can make training, adult learning more flexible, more bite-sized, as you say, more, you know, just in time skill delivery. So I think that's really interesting. I'd like to turn to Despina and just maybe as a little bit of background for most of the audience is that we worked with Greece a couple of years ago quite intensively to support Greece in making skills governance stronger, which means, you know, building around the skills intelligence also the infrastructure, the partnerships that is needed to make that skills intelligence actionable and powerful. So one of the outcomes of that work is that we saw that there is a need to invest more in qualitative foresight analysis because quantitative survey-based or big data-based, it shows part of the picture, but it doesn't show it all. Skill foresight is I think we can even say that at EU level, there's a bit of a boom ongoing in foresight because you know, when things are harder to predict, it's important to use different techniques to see what's next. Okay, my first question is maybe a bit provocative, but you know, this outcome that there was a need for more qualitative foresight analysis, did this influence, you know, the efforts in Greece to invest more in foresight analysis and foresight capacity?
Thank you, Jasper, for the questions, and of course, I'd like to thank CEDEFOP for this invitation and the challenge to participate in this interesting dialogue. Let me first let me start from a prelude, and I'll see. You'll see why I'm saying that. YESEVE, as you already saw from the agenda of this event, I'm a research associate at the Small Enterprises Institute of YESEVE. YESEVE is a national social partner employers organization and represents the vast majority of small, very small and micro enterprises. Please keep in mind that SMEs in Greece represent 99.9% of businesses. That's why I'm starting from this point of view, not just to give you a brief bio of YESEVE or mine. Because I want to make you aware of the fact that in Greece is not enough to talk about the labor market and the skills needed, but we must also understand the structure of the employment, as almost 30% of the employed in the country are self-employed. So, emphasizing only to the labor market, I truly believe, unintentionally leave the self-employed in the dark. So that is a parameter that I want you to keep in mind as I will try to answer your Jasper's question. I'm not sure, Jasper, if you want me to start answer your question per se, or to start present our initiatives.
It's fine to, you know, to explain a little bit how the initiative works. I mean, how you use skill foresight, how it contributes to better matching. That would be absolutely great.
Okay, so the first initiative called the Social Partners Intervention for Skills Foresight in the framework of the Labour Market Diagnosis System is a joint action of the Greek Social Partners Research Centers and YESEVE and Small Enterprises Institute, as the leader of the project, developed a set of methodologies and tools for skills foresight, detection of skills needs for specific occupation and sectors, and impact assessment for policies of skills in Greece. Also, we conducted a large-scale nationwide quantitative survey with entrepreneurs on the skills they consider as most important. The initiative also contributed to the strengthening of the social partners and the public interventions on skill agenda in formulating evidence-based policy proposals. The second initiative, called Foresight Lab for Monitoring Drivers of Change in Sectors and Occupations, aims to enhance adaptive capacity of specific sectors and occupations by systematically focusing on and monitoring of key parameters that will affect small businesses and particular professions in a period approximately of 5 to 7 years. So the main output of this initiative is the elaboration of specific adaptation plans for each profession. We call it a roadmap to change, with the aim of meeting future challenges. Part of the action is the exploration of emerging skills in a large number of occupations. So what have we learned from these two initiatives about skill foresight and skill needed? I will not refer to all the conclusions, the barriers, maybe the problems, but I will try to elaborate some of them. And I hope that I'll be closer to Jasper's question. Our first conclusion is that we cannot speak either of necessary soft skills or job-related skills per se. We need both, a combination of soft skills and occupational skills, job-related skills. We cannot have one without the other. Second one is that a time horizon of approximately 5 to 7 years, when we talk about foresight skill, is sufficient for skill foresight. It is enough time if there have been changes in an occupation to identify the necessary skills. It is not too late, not too early, taking into account that greater transformations occur. And for some scholars, we live in the era of polycrisis or permacrisis, but sectors and occupations maintain a relative autonomy within themselves. I'm not talking about a resistance to change. I'm not talking about a resistance to change that occupation has, but they have their autonomy. One more conclusion is that the implementation of skill foresight in the study of an education, it has an extremely positive effect on the development of the occupational profiles and their improvement. Also to the design of educational and training programs for upskilling. And the last one, things are more complicated than we often think they are. For instance, there are a number of social factors that determine how employers define which skills are most important to them. For example, the employer's gender and educational level are statistically significant factors in which skills they will place at the top of the hierarchy. That is some of my first points on my side. Of course, I'm available to answer any question which might have not such difficult. I hope that's the first one.
I'm sorry for being difficult, but I think you had a great answer. And
I'm joking.
And it was, really great to hear.
It is the stress also to.
No, it wasn't visible at all. No, I think we can conclude that this is. You have very good insights. I mean, and what I think also is interesting that you use the approach to also, kind of validate, what you're doing. So saying in terms of foresight horizon, you find this 7 years to be an optimal time period. I think other places it's different. I mean, they go 10 years ahead. I mean, we also try to sometimes go to 2030. So I think very interesting, insight. So I would like to now turn to the third initiative, which is the competent initiatives. The competent initiatives in Flanders, Belgium, by the Public Employment Service. And I'd like to invite Lane, Veerle, or both to give us a quick overview of your competent initiative and to explain what are its main strengths. So the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Jasper. I am going to tell you about VDAB, the Flemish PES, and how we are handling our market services, because we provide them on a competency-based method, and to do that we use our database or our reference framework called Competent 2. It's already our second version. We had before an older version, the Competent 1, but we had to do a new one because we needed some changes. This database is based on Rome. It is the French database from Pôle emploi, and we have been adapting it to our Flemish labor market. Our database Competent 2 contains a description in terms of competencies for about 600 professions, and it also contains several skills and knowledges, but it also contains soft skills, and at this moment we are working at the digital skills to add to it. These digital skills are in line with the DIGCOMP framework also. And we also worked very much on having short and clear formulations for our skills and knowledges. For this database, we have a partnership with our social partners, and this is for the use and the update of the database. And in order to keep it up to date and up to date with the new evolutions on the labor market, we issue an update every quarter of the year. These updates can contain changes to the content of existing professions or competencies, but they can also contain changes or at the number of professions. So we can also add new professions or new competencies, and we can make new compositions of professions. We can make them smaller or broader if necessary. These updates that we do in our database, they are based on feedback that we get from our own VDAB experts, but also from input or feedback that we get from our sectors that we work together with, or we also use big data analysis to do our updates. Now, our user, why we changed from Competent 1 to Competent 2 is that our user research showed that a framework that contains narrow professions with an extensive and overly detailed description of competencies, which is complex and with long sentences, that does not appeal to users. And that's why we have also introduced in our new database a kind of tags that we call competency sets, and the meaning of it is that they group evident and related competencies together under one concept, and this is how we will present them to our users. So what are the strengths of our database? The competency-based approach of Competent 2 reference framework form the basis for our labor market services at VDAB. And our services are provided on 3 action domains. One of the 3 is finding a job and matching. So it's about profiles and vacancies that are being described using the competencies from the framework. And that way they can easily be matched with each other. Then our second angle is the orientation towards the job, in which competencies, we will research which competencies a user already has and what competencies he or she needs to learn or needs to have to find the desired job for him or for her. And then we have the third angle. It's the training of the strengthening competencies angle. In this one, we learn users the competencies that you need and that they did not master yet. In the center of all these three angles, we have our profiles, our users' profiles, which contain the competencies from the competent reference framework. At VDRB, we believe a lot in the digital first principle. So that means that we put a lot of emphasis on our digital tools in such a way that people that are digitally self-reliant can use them completely independently to find a job. But user friendliness is very important for us. But we also have clients and target groups that are not digitally skilled and who have problems that prevent them from using our digital tools. So they need some intervention of an intermediary. In that case, we will mediate face-to-face with them. And then my last focus will be on the challenges for our competent database. The challenge is, of course, to modulate the framework in such a way that it can meet different goals. It must be flexible and alive and up to date, and formulations must be simple and short on one hand, and that is necessary because we want to be able to quickly capture labor market developments and respond quickly to them, and also to allow sufficient job mobility between the different jobs or professions, but also to be user-friendly. But on the other hand, our database also must be stable and provide sufficient information. And this is important to enable monitoring of data on professions and competencies over the years. It is also important to ensure the version management that has to remain manageable for our customers who use APIs or open data. And it is also important to provide sufficient information to other applications and users and goals who need a lot and extensive information. For instance, like for organizing training for some competencies or jobs. So these are, in short, the main principles of our competency-based way of working with Competent 2.
Thanks very much. Really interesting, and maybe also as a quick follow-up question. So basically, I mean, you have a system that's very advanced. So artificial intelligence is contributing to finding better matches. Now, of course, there's also the role of public employment advisors. You already said a little bit about it. You know how they can complement each other, one another. Can you explain a little bit more? Are there cases where you leave the AI to decide, basically to suggest matches? And I think something that's also, you know, a strength of your approach, that basically also because VDRB is the way it is, you have a very strong training component, which is not the case in public employment services in all countries. So you are also, I would say possibly, but maybe I shouldn't answer your question. You would be very much able to, you know, to identify, you know, the top-up training that would be required for someone to become, you know, competent for a particular role. But I'll let you speak.
The first question about the matching, is your question where the matching is just automatic or AI driven? Because Vera already explained that we have our matching tools online, and when you can do it yourself, you just can use the matching engine. We have different entries. You have your automatically matching that you can use, but you can also search for jobs. You have different possibilities, so it's not all automatic. And then you have also our clients that need some support. They have the digital tools but they can also have a face-to-face contact and a help to help them through the tools. Within the tools, we have also the different. On the one hand, we have the rule-based matching. It's based on competence. That's one matching tool. On the other hand, we have also our talent API, and that's an AI matching tool. So our clients can have matching results of both engines. And then the question about training. We are not training specialists, so we can give an answer for all of Flanders. But about VDAB, Veerle showed the triangle with the profile, the jobs, the orientation. And I think we use the skills in, on the one hand, the orientation. There we have a tool, and it's called Job Reach. So you can put in our tool the job that you are doing already, and then you have suggestions. You have this skill, competences, knowledges. If you are able to also get this one, you can reach to other occupations. So it's wide, it makes the horizon wider for our clients. And then more in the corner of training, we have our competency checks. It's also a tool. It's a new tool. We have to optimize it still a little bit, but it's very promising, where you can put your CV or profile or just your job, and it checks your competencies. It asks, do you know this? Do you know that? And depending on your answers, that tool is also making suggestions of trainings you can follow. And then we have the more classic things. For instance, training on the job. When a consultant at VDAB is placing a client to a job, we make individual training programs, and they are also based on the competence standard. That's the job. And these skills we have to learn, so the job will be a success.
Okay, great. Very clear. I hear you say that, you know, the system also gives, let's say, people an image of what they could reach potentially, and I think that's very important, because we live in a time of transition, and you know, making these transitions concrete at individual level is one of the ways to get into right transitions. So in these virtual get-togethers, we also sometimes have the opportunity where it would not be me asking the questions, but the panelists could ask each other questions. And I'd like to see if you would have any questions to each other. Maybe Noreen, would you like to start? I see your hand up. Great.
I would. Thank you very much, Jasper, and thank you to Velasi and Veerle and Neen. Really interesting presentations. But I'm very curious. Recently, the OECD report was focusing on that kind of strategic, structured approach to, I suppose, longer-term planning of carrying out skills needs analysis and then developing those strategic approaches to address them. So how would you apply this to a workplace context with employers and employees? You know, my experience would be that companies and employees or employers tend to dive into the solution focus and don't kind of take the step back to take the more strategic, deep dive. What are my skill needs? What are the competencies or skills that I require? And then how do I put a plan in place to kind of maybe look at longer workforce planning? Do you have any insights into that, or how does it work in Flanders or Belgium?
I don't have a very good answer on this question. I only no, in Flanders, it's also sponsored by our Flemish government. We have the scope researches. It's each sector who is doing very profound research on a qualitative base, a quantitative base of what's our future as a sector. Well, what's coming, and also how are we as the aggregate of the companies in our sector, where are we standing? That's also a little bit included, and they're gonna formulate within their sector actions. They are gonna formulate actions about so they have view on the needs. They're gonna formulate trainings inside their sector organization, but they are also going to make partnerships, for instance, with VDAB. How can you help with this transition? But that's for the moment the only answer that I can give you on this question. Thank you, Dean.
I think it's actually a great answer, because we should also see in other countries that, you know, this sectoral dimension, the countries that are quite far advanced, they really highlight the sectoral level, basically. I mean, think of Estonia, which basically built its skills anticipation system, let's say, on the basis of the sector. So that's basically the design element in their system. So I think this is great. I would like to give Despina also an opportunity to ask a question, so if you would have one, Despina.
Yes, thank you very much, Jasper. Noreen, I would like to ask Noreen, because I find very interesting all the work that SOLAS do to support more vulnerable people. And it is a very important job. My answer is there an evaluation system, a way to monitoring the effect and the impact of your initiative in the labor market? Is there any data from the field, from the SMEs or the specific beneficiaries?
Yes, thank you, Despina. Yes, we do. Each education and training board would have a kind of an extensive evaluation process in place to get, you know, immediate feedback from the programs themselves. They would also engage with the tutors to see, you know, based on the audience that they have, do they need to make changes? Do they need to update it? Is it relevant? All of that kind of stuff. And then we would engage with the employers as well, and you know, our other stakeholders to see if there is any feedback. We are currently working on enhancing that whole process. And we have developed, which is almost finalized, an enhanced monitoring and reporting framework, which will not only use all our own systems to collect the quantitative data, and we monitor that on a monthly basis, but to get the qualitative data. So by, you know, let's say maybe every 3 to 5 years, we could do a real deep dive and do a kind of a big impact assessment. Because we're only 3 years in, we're not really in a position to do that yet. You know, we really needed the skills to advance in this to take off, to be implemented, to gain some ground. But we think now, over the next year or so, we certainly will be looking at that deep dive to try see what are the impacts in terms of retaining your own job, or kind of moving job, or kind of developing new skills. As I mentioned, we have the whole new range of sustainability skills, digital skills. So I think we should gain and be able to gather some really interesting data there. But, you know, at a local level, there are very robust systems. At a national level, they all roll up into that. But as I said, we are currently finalizing an enhanced monitoring and reporting framework where we will be able to do those periodic evaluations to kind of get the real sense of what impact the Skills to Advance initiative has on the Irish workplace.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lorraine.
Thanks, Lane or Veerle. Would you have a question to Despina or maybe Noreen as well?
My question to Despina is, so on the one hand, you have the initiative with its more high level, with the evidence-based policy advice. On the other hand, you do very concrete work on some specific sectors where you go really. Is it the aim to do this for more sectors, so you have a view on all of your labor market, or do you choose your targets because you know these are our core business or our difficult angles? How are you choosing this?
Okay. Lynn, I will try to answer your question. The way we choose the sectors and the occupations that we will dive in and search for the skills, and the skills will be very important after 5 or 7 years. It's part of what can I say, pre-research stage, and we pick specific sectors that they are important for the Greek economy, and of course occupations that are that our criteria. We have specific criteria to choose the occupations. Criteria, for examples, will be that these occupations are very important for the Greek economy. Occupations we can find a lot of changes. Occupations that people from a low-skilled level become more and more part of this. So it's not a random collection of this. This procedure is not a random collection. It is a very specific way to choose sectors and occupations in order to clarify the skills they need.
Okay, great. I see that we have also a question in the chat for Veerle or Lane, which is about the richness of the VDB data, and you know the use of that data in terms of saying something about the effectiveness of skills policies, and in particular digital skills policies. So are you already working in that direction to see also, let's say, from the evaluation side, if digital skills policies are effective? And if so, do you have evidence of impact? I realize it's many questions, but
yeah, the question is that we have proof that working with skills is more effective than
more about when we talk about digitalization, do we can you see links between what you're doing and what, for instance, the Flemish government is promoting in terms of digital transition?
No, for the moment, the digital skills we are working on it because there are a lot of digital aims on the European level, on the Flemish level, And we are aware at this moment at VDAB, and also in Flanders, we don't have a good framework for digital skills. It's in our competent database, but it's a little bit here, it's a little bit there. It's a little bit same for ESCO also.
Yeah.
So we are now at the moment, we are working on identifying a digital skill. And for each occupational profile, we will formulate a skill set on the DIGCAMP framework. So we have in Flanders for each occupation a little skill set of DIGCAMP. So we have a tool for beginning to communicate and to collaborate about digital skills. So it's a big to-do on our list.
Yeah, it's also a big to-do list. I think anyone working with skills taxonomies knows how difficult it is to, to overcome the challenges of the change that's happening. So you want something that's stable, but at the same time you want something that's also flexible and reflects, what's happening. So and that can be quite challenging. So, and I think that is a point, but it's great that work is ongoing, to look at those, let's say, dimensions, so that. Also information can really, help, push maybe the digital transition in ways that we want it to go. I think let me check quickly the chat. Okay. Okay, I see a question, maybe one more question. Okay, and this is about an issue we discussed earlier. Is about, isn't it so that some overqualification, some overskilling is preferable for people to be able to adapt quicker to advancement in technology and to have options to explore career progression opportunities? I mean, it's a little bit. Maybe one of you could reflect a little bit on that. So some surplus skills, are not always necessarily a problem, but they can also really be an asset. That's basically the question. Yes, Noreen, please.
Thanks, Jasper. Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think our labour market and the workplace is changing so much and so quickly, and albeit even in terms of the digitization, the automation, all that kind of stuff, it may be happening at a pace and we may not see it here now. But in terms of being able to really be equipped with the right skills to not only, look for other positions, but retain our current jobs, I think we now have to be in this constant loop of reskilling, upskilling ourselves. And that's where I suppose we've taken a particular approach around the whole micro-qualification piece. And I know it's more generally known as credentials, but because ours are all aligned to the National Framework of Qualifications, we've used that term. But I think they are accredited within their own right, but some of those micro-qualifications are stackable into kind of, a special purpose award, as in the case for the robotics, whereby for some person, they may only need, if you're in a leadership role, you may need only the fundamentals of robotics to understand really the approach for the business, but somebody who's really kind of doing the job may need all of the aspects of that. So I think, this is here to stay, this lifelong learning, continuous approach to kind of reskilling and upskilling ourselves, to not only anticipate what the labour market changes will be, but to be ready and to be ahead of it, so that we can keep industry going at the level that we need to, and that we kind of retain our employment situations as they currently stand.
Okay, that's I think it's also a little bit. Thanks you very much, Noreen, for those reflections. I think it's also quite linked to what we see basically as overall conclusions that are emerging in this year of skills, and that conclusion is that we really need now to move full speed ahead with skills policy implementation. We have policies in place at EU level, also at national level. We have a lot of funding available. The EU level of funding is unprecedented, and we also have political will and momentum. So in this process, and sometimes it's called the skills revolution, this skills intelligence, this powerful information plays, of course, a crucial role. It can be used as a compass for policy implementation, and that's actually one of the major use cases it has had in the previous years. But I think, from what you're saying and from all the examples that we have in our matching skills database, it's also very clear that skills intelligence should become much more. It should be much more, let's say, leveraged to make change really happen at the level where it matters. And today's examples, I think we can conclude, have shown that this is possible. And at the same time, they demonstrate that there is really enormous policy potential, policy learning potential in Europe to design skill matching processes that work on the ground. Because ultimately the skills revolution will happen at that level, not in ministries, but it will happen on factory floors, in communities, in cities, etc. Before closing, I have 1 minute left, I see. Please allow me to advertise our next virtual get-together. I think you should see it on the screen right now. That is virtual get-together number 6, and it's scheduled for the 7th of November. It starts at the same time as today, 11:30 CET. This next virtual get-together is co-organized with our sister agency, ETF, the European Training Foundation in Torino, Italy. And we will use evidence from Cedefop's second European Skills and Jobs Survey, which has been carried out in EU countries and in some of ETF's partner countries. And we do that to look at digital divides. You are all warmly invited, and you can already mark your calendars. You can keep an eye on Cedefop social media in the next few days, because we're going to open registration quite soon. Please take 2 minutes to fill out the evaluation form. We very much appreciate your feedback. The link is in the chat. I would like to close by thanking our speakers, panelists, my Cedefop colleagues, Beatrice and Sografia, and our ICT support colleagues. I think we had a great discussion here with the panelists, with the presentations. And I would like to thank everyone for being with us today. So that closes today's virtual get-together. We hope to see you again at the next one. And I would like to wish you a nice rest of the day from all of us at Cedefop. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you.